Hi everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. For this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I personally experience and have had a lot of issues with, especially in regards to, understanding my own emotions logically and explaining them to other people, and that topic is splitting. And splitting is really common in BPD. It basically refers to our tendency to view things in absolutes, in black and white, all or nothing. Of course, that's not to say that people with BPD can't consider nuances and all attributes of situations and people, but splitting is an automatic defense mechanism. Non-borderlines do this too, to an extent, because, our human brains like to categorize things. We like to keep things in our own neat little categories, have everything kind of labeled out. It makes sense to us, it makes us feel safe. However, with borderline, splitting comes from a warped form of thinking that we use to protect ourselves. As I've spoken about previously, I can't talk today. As I've spoken about previously, the crux of BPD is emotional dysregulation, and a lot of borderlines come from a place of trauma and insecurity, and our brains need a reason to discard things that we see as bad to protect us, while embracing things we see as good, even if that means ignoring the negative aspects of the good in a sort of ignorant bliss. Splitting allows us to avoid dealing with complex emotional nuances that are present in every situation. It's also often accompanied by other defense mechanisms. For example, someone with borderline may be in denial about the negative attributes of someone that they have categorized as good. This can be completely subconscious, and someone can subconsciously project negative attributes or positive attributes onto someone or something and treat them passive-aggressively. It'll come out in behavior, but it's kind of seemingly for no reason. So splitting, or just the idea that, we view things in absolutes, isn't specific to borderline, but the thing about BPD splitting is that it can change incredibly quickly how we feel about situations or people, and that's what usually confuses non-borderlines, is just the snap change in judgment. Borderlines can go really quickly from idolizing someone to absolutely detesting them, and vice versa, maybe because of just one small thing that happened. For example, if a friend of mine spoke to me in a tone that was a little bit offensive or jarring, I could go from absolutely loving them to being really pissed off inside and starting to detest them. And then they'll do something nice and I'll be like, oh yes, this is my friend, I love them, there's nothing bad about them, nothing bad ever happened. And that just kind of, that flip-flopping between the two extremes is very common with BPD. So I just had a little example from my personal life, and it's not really little, it's quite convoluted, and I will probably make a video about it later on because it was a complete shit show of a situation, and it really affected me, and my BPD definitely was a big part in this whole thing. But my freshman year of college, I had a friend who we'll call Mark, who I was completely in love with. Of course, because this is a video about BPD and we can't have nice things, this was an absolutely awful relationship. This friendship was incredibly volatile and toxic on both of our parts, but he also really mistreated me. But because of this, splitting phenomenon and the denial, I idolized him and just ignored or devalued how terribly he treated me. Anything he did that bothered me just didn't feel as important as the good parts. My friends would point out flaws. They'd be like, he's awful, he treated you badly, he's really annoying, he's pretentious, he's boring, and my brain could not listen to that. It was just incapable, which was super weird because there were some awful things he did that just did not hit me. And then he would do one little nice thing and I'd be like, yes, this is awesome. Yes, this is affirming my belief that he is good and I should idolize him. Which was super unhealthy. But around, 6-7 months into this friendship, one of my female friends at the time, who we'll call Carly, Carly started dating him. And now Carly was a close friend of mine who I had actually introduced those two together. They only knew each other through me, I'm just saying, but she knew that I was completely in love with this Mark guy. So of course there was some resentment there about the whole like girl code-esque dating your friend's crush thing, but that was something that I was willing to overlook because these were two people that my brain had categorized as good and that I absolutely loved. And so I tried really hard. I communicated to just like kind of work through that. And at first it did work fine. Like it was a situation that wasn't quite fair to me, but like it was awful. Like Mark even admitted that for like the entire second half of our friendship, he was using hanging out with me as a way to see Carly. Like he'd only invite me to things or hang out with me because there was the potential that I would invite my friend. So essentially I was cast aside by both of them. And of course it really hurt, but I was really trying to keep these relationships and maintain these friendships because of this like idolization that I had. And then one day, Carly pulled me aside and essentially sat me down to insult me for like 20 minutes because I had requested that Mark not hang out with us when Carly and I were with our friend group and vice versa. I just did not want to be around the two of them together, which they had both initially agreed to, but then repeatedly overstepped this boundary. Like Mark would kind of like trick me or force me into situations where I had to hang out with them both. I guess just to prove that I could, or just to prove that they weren't like a gross couple. I don't know, but it made me incredibly uncomfortable. And of course, it is unrealistic of me to expect them to, you know, not be together when I'm around or anything like that. It's like I understood that part of it. But one of the things she told me was that I was no longer allowed to knock on Mark's door to hang out with him. And her logic was that because she was often in his room now, I can't knock on the door. Which I can kind of understand it, but to me that sounds like that's like if I told people that they can't knock on my neighbor's door because sometimes I'm over at their house for a barbecue. And it's like she was setting boundaries over something that's not hers in the first place. And it showed me that it came from a place of perhaps jealousy, insecurity, or just like, I don't know, like malice. But that thing made me instantly hate her. And any nuances in the relationship were thrown right out the door. And even now, every time she does anything, I get incredibly annoyed. Like I have to remove myself from the room because my brain cannot comprehend any of the good things that, like, good parts of her. It's like everything she does bothers me and I hate her. And my other friends are all really confused. They're like, you guys were friends. They'll tell me all these good things about her. And like, I understand that. Like, I know she's not like a terrible, terrible person, but my brain as a defense mechanism, because she hurt me in the past, cannot let her in. Like, I hate her. My brain hates her. And when I talked to Mark about what she told me, I naively assumed he would side with me because it, to me, just seemed like an illogical thing to ask. And he did not. He completely sided with her. He told me that he didn't have a problem with me knocking on his door until, you know, she said that, and he was like, oh, I'm just gonna go along with what she says. And so I was like, okay. That's when the switch completely flipped on Mark, and all of the awful things I had kept behind this like mental dam, and I'd kept all the negative things from affecting me while I was still idolizing him, and suddenly all of that broke, and all these memories and emotions came flooding back in, and I realized how much he had actually hurt me in the past that I had completely ignored, and so I was completely flooded with all of these negative emotions. So I went from completely being in love with him to hating his guts in just like 2 seconds. And, idolizing this man caused me to subject myself to a lot of mistreatment, a lot of hurt. And so now my brain, again, as a defense mechanism, refuses to consider anything good about him to protect myself from any further hurt. It's like let all these negative emotions out through the dam, and then built a big wall so that he like could not get in. None of the good parts of him could get in. And that has helped. It has saved me from a lot of emotional hurt, but it also caused just this entire volatile, awful experience that still has weird repercussions like socially for me, and it's just exhausting. And of course that's kind of like a big example, but it could happen day to day with like the smallest things. Like I mentioned earlier, like if a friend of mine says something in a tone that upsets me, or like maybe even just doesn't respond to like a message or a text like the way I expect them or wanted them to, I can spiral and honestly like start to resent and despise this friend for a bit. And usually when this happens, like I've learned to kind of remove myself from the situation, kind of have some alone time and just think it out, because I know it's not logical. It's just my emotions being like, this person hates you, you should hate them. And I know that's not true. So I usually try to remove myself, but the emotions are still there. It's different, like logically knowing something and feeling something. But there are times where I'll actually start to like hate a friend of mine, because this kind of builds up until they do something that, makes me happy or is really nice, or just I enjoy a moment with them, and I'll flip right back to loving them. And anything bad they did, even if I was justified in being upset, I'll just forget it for the time being. And it's really complicated. Splitting is really complicated, and it's really exhausting, and it's super confusing for people to listen to when you talk about them, when you talk to them about your opinions, because they're like, wow, you and this person are best friends, like what happened, like what a funny story. One of my therapists freshman year of college, I had this one friend, Miriam, who, sometimes I'd go in and be like, oh yes, like Miriam has been she's just been there for me, she's been awesome and I love her. And the next week I'd come in and be like, I hate Miriam because she did this thing. And it was exhausting. My therapist was like, so why are you friends with her? Like, it was just, yeah. It's super exhausting. It's like my brain is constantly flipping between these very strong extremes. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit, because it's not something that I hear talked about in like other kind of mental health talks. It's usually like BPD specific, which makes sense, but still, like, it's not something that I even knew had a term, had a name for, and I didn't know it was like a thing that other people experienced. And so I wanted to talk about it in case anyone else is feeling really alone, and I don't know, I hope this will help, and I hope this was interesting, I guess. Okay. So like I should also, talk a little bit about the art in this video, and it's essentially just like a little style challenge kind of thing, like draw a character, draw a self-portrait in all these different styles. So that's what you see here. The one in the middle is kind of my like avatar character self-portrait little like style, and then around it is just, that character kind of drawn in different styles that I've chosen. So hope you enjoy. It was really educational, I guess, or just inspiring, trying to draw, myself or my character in all these different styles. I think that I've learned a lot, and it was definitely a challenge. I think the hardest one was probably the Studio Ghibli one or the BoJack Horseman one, because those I think are pretty far from my style. I think the most challenging part was line art, because you can see, my own personal style. I don't really do like an outline for things, but most of these other ones did have line art, so if it looks kind of wonky, that is why. It's because I am not used to doing it. Anyway, I hope this video was educational, informative, inspiring. I hope you enjoyed the art. I hope you enjoyed the little stories. And yeah, have a great day. Bye.